Well, hello, folks, and welcome to the Melhorn Fishing Podcast. I hope you're having a good day, whatever day it is that you happen to be listening or watching the show. Today, we're going to talk about trophy catfish and what makes a trophy catfish. But first, I want to give a shout out to everybody who has been listening to the podcast and watching the YouTube channel. The repeat customers, as they say. I appreciate you guys coming back and checking it out. And if you're new, whether the podcast or YouTube, I appreciate you stopping by and giving me a shot and listening and watching. If you're listening to the podcast, I've actually had some feedback from some people that found the podcast before they did the YouTube channel. Most of the people know about the YouTube channel and then kind of migrate over to the podcast once they realize it's out there. But I've had a lot of people who have found the podcast and then found the YouTube channel. So if you're stumbling across the podcast, go check out the YouTube channel. The easiest way to find all this stuff, whichever direction you're going, and the easiest way to contact me is going to my website, melhornfishing.com. There's a link to everything on there, whether it be the podcast, the YouTube channel, my guide business. I'm a licensed captain here and do guide trips, or some of the gear that I use. People ask about the gear. There's links there. But most important, there's a contact section, and you can send me an email. If you got a question, idea, give me some feedback. A lot of times I ask for feedback during these videos, and that's the place to do it, melhornfishing.com. Go check it out, and that's the way to get a hold of me and find all this different media that we do. There's also links to the Facebook page and all that kind of stuff. Instagram. I always forget to promote those things, but I've got all that stuff, so a good way to stay in tune. But yeah, it's trying to get a few more of these podcasts out too. It's here lately. It's been crazy hectic with everything going on coming here into the fall, and so trying to stay on top of it. What I was going to talk about today was trophy fish. Another topic. This is one I was actually on a flight somewhere, scrolling through Facebook before the plane took off, and I seen some questions about what makes a trophy fish. What do you define as a trophy fish? And I'm going to go over some things that are a little bit just on the terminology and kind of a personal, emotional take on it and more of a scientific take. So let me start by saying this. Not all catfish waters are created equal. And what I mean by that is, if you want to catch a 100-pound catfish, you are not going to catch that in your local municipal park unless somebody put a 100-pound catfish in there that came from somewhere else. Not all places grow big fish. Let me also say this, because back up there, fish have to live a long time to get to these truly epic 100-pound proportions. The other thing is, even if, let's say it takes 25 years for a catfish to get to 100 pounds, if you've got 100 catfish and they all live 25 years, there may be only 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 of them that make it to that size. They do not have uniform growth rates, and a lot of it depends on genetics, how they eat, the temperament and personality of the fish plays a part. So they're not all going to get to that size. So you have to have somewhat of a genetic anomaly, first of all, then it needs age, then it needs the right location, it needs the right water. So my point being, these giant fish are not everywhere. And that really sets the stage for the whole discussion about the emotional side of what a trophy is. And what I mean by that is, you'll hear people say, well, this is the biggest fish I ever caught and it's a trophy to me. Okay, there's that. Or, there's the angle of, which I believe, and I tell people, it depends on the body of water you're fishing to a certain extent as to what a trophy fish is. Where I fish, kind of my little rule of thumb formula is a limit of fish. Make sure I say this correctly. What I consider a trophy fish is when you get a limit of that many fish in a tournament, you've got a good shot at winning. So, on our local lakes, okay, if you, let's say it's a 2-fish limit on the tournament, if you have 2 20-pound fish, you're not going to win. Plain and simple. It's not going to happen. Those are good fish, but they are not into that trophy category. When you get into something a little bit bigger, let's say you start getting to that 30, 35-pound range, you are then into a category that puts you in that kind of range to win. Now, that's where I fish, okay? You go to some of these smaller lakes around, and that 20-pound fish I spoke about earlier may win that tournament. So, in those particular waters, you can kind of break down what is a trophy fish and what is not a trophy fish. You go to some place like the James River, or down to Gunnersville, someplace like that, Wheeler. That trophy fish is going to be, it's going to be a higher number. Now, with all that said, there's actually some scientific data. There's actually the biologists and the fisheries experts actually have a category, the way they categorize fish. And this is based on a percentage of the size of the maximum, blah, blah, blah. They've got a formula, actually, for figuring out what is considered by scientific literature to be a trophy fish. And I've seen some of those numbers in some papers and some different stuff, and that has, for blue catfish, been around 40. We have seen 41 pounds. That seems around 40, 41 pounds seems to be kind of the number, and that's across the entire country. What's a trophy catfish in America? A blue catfish, trophy blue catfish, it's going to be somewhere in that range. That's where you would get into you're in the upper echelons of what a big fish is. Obviously, that's going to be less for a flathead. Flatheads don't get as big as blue catfish, plain and simple. They don't get as big. Same thing for channel catfish. World record's 58 pounds. The world record blue cat's, almost 3 times that. It's 143 pounds. So, it's a big difference here on channel catfish. So 20 pounds may be the benchmark there on a channel catfish. So my whole point is there's a couple of different ways to look at it. A lot of it, if you want to keep it in perspective, and this is what I tell people you really should do, keep it in perspective for where you're fishing. It's not fair to beat yourself up and, go out here and have a good time, go fishing, and, you catch a 15-pound, blue cat, and you're going like, man, I see all these people catching these big giant fish, but you're fishing in a small river, a small lake somewhere, a place that doesn't have a lot of blue cats in it, or let's say you catch a 10-pound channel cat. That's a big channel cat. So you got to keep it in perspective for where you're at. Now, that can be tough, knowing kind of what the upper end in these kind of places is, but, you got to keep it real. You're not, like I said, you're not going to catch 100-pound catfish in a municipal pond unless they've been put in there. So it's a little bit of a depends on what you got around. The other thing is, the other thing too, guys, is enjoy the pursuit, enjoy the game. And I know we all get competitive with ourselves and competitive with, we see everything on Facebook. Everything is a competition on Facebook, even though there's no organized tournament with it. A lot of us, myself included, I've done it. You see this stuff and you start subconsciously competing and comparing what you're doing to what somebody else is doing. And you'll never be happy doing that, because you will always find something better than you. And it may not even be in the same lake. That's what's bad. We'll sit there and watch something. You go, man, I just can't catch no big fish like that. All them fish he's catching out of the James River. Well, guess what? You're never going to catch those fish out of the lakes I fish in around here. It's just not going to happen. So you got to keep it in perspective with what's going on. So You know, some people say a trophy is in the eye of the beholder. To a certain extent, that's true. But it's, there is a real standard for it, a real defined standard by scientific method, and then there is a shifting scale for where you're at. So that's my advice to you. Just kind of keep it in perspective to where you're fishing and the waters that you're fishing, and I think you'll be happier in the end mentally with all that, because the last thing you want to do is turn something that, like fishing, that is fun, enjoyable, a great pastime, into something that is a competition against yourself, to where you're never going to win and never be satisfied, because that can turn into something that's not fun. So keep it fun, keep it enjoyable, have a good time, try to get better. I mean, it's great to try to get to that next level, but understand that where you're fishing at, there may be a limit to exactly how far you can go. Now, hey, listen, you can have aspirations to go to other places and fish, try different places. Listen, I got people that come on guide trips with me down here, and I have to keep it in perspective, because we will get out there and, let's say we're starting out and we're catching some 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pound fish. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good fish. That's a nice fish, but we need, let's get something bigger. We'll try to find bigger fish. And all of a sudden I say, well, I'll give you it's just a good story. It's a good story. We had been fishing. We caught a couple of little small channel cats. We catch this 8-pound blue, which is, now for us, I mean, it's just a run-of-the-mill fish. You can catch these things sometimes, one right after another. Caught this fish, got it off. These people didn't want to keep any fish. I chunk it back. We didn't even take a picture with it. Guy catches another one, like 9, 10 pounds, a little bit bigger, and he stopped me. He said, hey, do you mind if I take a picture with that fish? And I said, no, it's all right, man. He said, that's the biggest fish I ever caught. And he said, actually, that 8-pounder was the biggest fish that I ever caught, but you threw it back before I could get a picture of it. And I felt horrible. I was like, that's where you lose perspective on stuff. And I get reminded of it doing what I do, but y'all need to be aware of that too, and what you're doing. That's the biggest fish this guy ever caught. Where he fished at, they just didn't have catfish that big. And, I just take for granted that, an 8-pound fish, we go, those will pass the time until we can get to a bigger one. We caught some bigger fish that day. It was a great day. But I had lost perspective on that. And it's a reminder that, one, I'm blessed to do what I do. I'm blessed to catch the fish that we catch. And they ain't the biggest fish in the world, but we're blessed to be able to do it. And, not everybody has that opportunity. And you may not be in a place where you can do that. So, again, keep it in perspective. Keep it relative to where you're at, where you're fishing. And I think if you kind of temper some of them goals a little bit and those aspirations to where you're fishing, what you're doing, I think it'll make for a happier experience for you. It's again, you don't want to make it a miserable outing out there fishing, man. You can usually get a good idea of what's around. With Facebook nowadays, you can kind of get a good idea of what's, in a reservoir or lake or river that you're fishing. In the old days, all you had was rumors, lies, and legends of, the big catfish at the dam or at the bridge or whatever. And we all know that doesn't exist. But now with Facebook, you can kind of get a good idea of what the potential is. You may not be able to catch it right away, but, if hey, there's been a 25-pound fish caught out of this river, it'll give you a good idea. Keep an eye on the tournaments. If you have tournaments on the lakes or rivers that you fish, see what those tournament results look like. There's the big fish in a tournament usually is going to be pretty close to, it's going to be in the upper 10% of what's in that water. There can be bigger fish, but generally that's going to be kind of the upper echelon of what your potential is for catching. So you can see that'll give you an idea of what the potential is. Some of these lakes, a lot, like I said, I got people on guide trips that are from places that have nothing but channel cats. They don't even have blues. And, so having, a little bit of perspective will make your time out there a lot more fun, and keep it real. If you don't have those big fish, you can maybe plan a trip to go somewhere where you can catch some. Go to some different waters, some bigger waters, that kind of stuff. So we may try to talk about that in some future podcasts. Just what the potential, some places to go to. Kind of a hit list of places to go try down the road when you're looking for that trophy fish out there. But hopefully this gives you some good feedback, something to keep in perspective. And until next time, we'll catch you guys out on the water. Well, folks, if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Here are a couple more videos that I think you're going to like. I'd watch that one and then that one. No, do that one first and then that one. I don't know. Just watch them both. They're both good.